Alright, CNT120, Chapter 2, Cable Management. There's a bunch of topics they mention here about as I'm installing my cabling, dealing with my cabling. Here's some concerns when dealing with this cabling. One of them is termination. When I'm terminating my twisted pair cabling, I need to be careful I do not untwist this wire too much. These wires are twisted together for what's called cancellation. Any sort of outside interference, like from a power cable or whatever, because these wires are twisted together, any sort of interference that's picked up in here, the twisting causes that interference to kind of cancel each other out. The interference affecting the orange wire and the interference affecting the white-orange, those two twisted together, they tend to cancel each other. So as I untwist this to terminate, if I untwist it too much, I open up the possibility for what's called crosstalk, or basically noise to be injected into my data cabling, is what it amounts to. So when I'm terminating, I need to minimize the amount that I untwist this. And the standard calls for like minimal untwist. So I need to be careful as I'm terminating to watch that. Here would be a pretty good termination. Here would be a pretty lousy termination. You see the untwisted out there, and there's a lot of length there. I need to keep it close to the termination and keep that twisted as much as possible. When I'm routing my cable, I need to have a nice gentle bend around corners. Again, we're dealing with high frequency data signals and large data rates moving through these cables. So all these little things add up. All these little things matter. So as I'm dealing with my cabling and I'm laying it in trays and so forth, I need nice gentle bends. The standard calls for the bend radius should be 4 times the cable diameter or larger. So if my cable diameter is 1/4 of an inch, I should at least have a 1-inch radius here or larger when I'm routing my cabling around a corner. And that's why you see nice big gentle bends there. After I install cabling, I should be putting a continuity tester on there to make sure at least I have a valid connection. And these are the kind of the continuity testers that we actually have in our toolkits in our lab room. We also have these as well. This is going to give you a quick electrical test of like, yep, there's a complete circuit here. This is actually going to give you a little bit more information about how long it is, and maybe is it able to carry the data that we want to carry. It's still a relatively basic test, but it's enough to let you know, yes, it's working, or no, I need to re-terminate it in because there's a problem. When I'm bundling my cables, I need to really be careful of plastic cable ties. If I use them, I need to bundle them loosely. Better yet, I should be trying to use the Velcro cable ties. Those I can undo, loosen up, so I don't have them bundled too tight. And in many cases, I can undo these, lay more cables in, and then put them back around. That's usually the better route to go, the Velcro cable ties. But I need to make sure they're not bundled too tight. I shouldn't really be laying cables across the floor. If I have to, for some reason, get them in some kind of protection. They make all kinds of channels that I can lay my cabling in to protect them. Up in my cable trays, if I have things like fiber optic, I might even install a duct up there. This is called interduct, to protect my fiber optic. So I'm usually thinking about protecting my cabling. I shouldn't be laying on the floor, but if I have to, make sure there's some sort of protection over. And things like fiber optic, I might even install in a conduit, even up in a cable tray. I need to look out for sources of EMI, electromagnetic interference. That's what EMI stands for. That is basically interference from anything using power. So a power line can actually have, a power line has magnetic fields around it. Those magnetic fields can actually induce noise into my data cabling. Things like fluorescent lights can do the same thing. Things like motors can do the same thing. And that comes from, air handlers moving air around a building, air conditioners moving air around a building, pumps turning on and off, fans turning on and off, power lines. I need to look out for those and keep my cabling. It depends on what it is. Sometimes it's only a few inches up to a few feet away from that. So I usually want to try to keep it away from them as much as possible. Keep my data lines away from that. I might need to worry about plenum spaces. Plenum spaces is where I have basically air moving around my building. So if I install my cabling in this ceiling area where we might be using for moving air through the building, the cabling installed in there is now installed in a plenum space. So that cabling needs to be plenum rated. Now, what that means is the cabling has a jacket on made out of a type of plastic. An ordinary piece of plastic on a jacket would be PVC, polyvinyl chloride. If that catches on fire, it's going to burn and emit all kinds of toxic fumes off. If you've ever thrown something plastic in a campfire, hopefully not, but if you have, you'll see it usually emits all kinds of smoke and sometimes even like green flames and things. Well, those are toxic fumes. So an ordinary, patch cable, if it catches on fire, is going to emit all kinds of toxic fumes. Well, I can't use that kind of cabling up in these air spaces because those fumes might get pumped throughout my building. So the cabling I install in those needs to be plenum rated, which means the insulation on there, it's still plastic, but it's a different type. It doesn't mean it's fireproof. It doesn't mean it's fire resistant. It'll still catch on fire and burn, but it does not emit those high levels of toxic fumes. So my cabling actually has a rating. The jacket actually has a rating to let you know it's plenum or not. Typically, if I look at that last letter, it gives me a clue. If I see a P in the this last spot there, it's plenum rated cabling. If I see an R, it's riser. If I see G, it's general. So the P in the last spot is the key. This right here is ordinary patch cable. Patch cable is not plenum rated. That ordinary patch cable is not plenum rated. Meanwhile, if I look at a cable and see CMP on, or I look at a box and see it says plenum, that lets you know the outer jacket of this is a different type of plastic that will emit very, very low levels of toxic fumes that would be safe to be installed in a plenum space. So as I deal with those plenum spaces, I need to be thinking plenum rated cabling. And yes, it is more expensive. Sometimes twice the price as regular, patch cable, if you will. It is much more expensive. Your local building and fire codes are the ones that will specify what you have to do. But typically, if you're installing cabling up in these spaces, you put plenum rated cabling in. That's safe to err on that. When I'm dealing with my equipment racks, I do need to worry about grounding my equipment in my equipment racks. There's actually guidelines on grounding your equipment to like a bar in the rack, and then that gets grounded to building ground. And there is actually guidelines on how to do that. So when I'm dealing with my equipment, I'm looking at grounding my racks and my equipment. Installing my cabling, I usually need to leave a little bit extra here for if I need to move a rack around or take a cable out and re-terminate because of a problem. I need to leave a little slack. So a lot of times you'll see service loops, or you'll even see sometimes in a rack that there'll be the cabling goes around a loop and then down into the rack, giving you a little bit of slack there. Support my cabling and cable trays as we showed earlier. Yes. Yes, as I'm routing my cabling through the hallways and all, above the ceilings and down the hall, they're installed in cable trays. And a lot of times you see these basket type. There is different styles, but a lot will use a basket type. Patch panels. Yes, use patch panels to terminate and organize. And as you see here, things are bundled and organized. And that allows for quick connections, disconnections, and also help in troubleshooting. Here's the front and back of the patch panel, and here is even a product called Neat Patch that allows you to neatly patch all of your patch panels into switches. That's a name brand, just so you're aware of them. Again, I don't get free T-shirts or anything, just aware of their product. Most companies are going to have a standard on how they do things, and it might spell out that you use a certain vendor, you might use a certain brand of product. Some installers will use blah brand. That way everything is standard throughout, and everything can be, warranty, that sort of thing. So in a company, there might be standards of I'm using a certain product, I'm terminating a certain way, I'm labeling a certain way, etc., etc. So be aware of that in a company too. Maybe even document that that's what you're doing. Documentation, yes. I need to document once I installed what's terminated, where it's going. And there is all kinds of different ways to do this. There's even different software products to document your equipment racks, spreadsheets you can use to lay out your switch ports, etc. Documentation is key. Labeling, yes, I need to label my cables, I need to label my ports, I need to label my patch panels, I need to label my connectors. And again, this is all in the name of helping with troubleshooting. And there is all kind of products to help. Labels that go around, there's label printers, there's little labels that have flags on, there's ways you can color code things, etc. And I think one of the next things they mention is, in some cases, even use color-coded patch cables, if that's going to help you. I know many, many places do that. And some use a certain color code to indicate it's a desktop, it's a printer, it's an access point, it's a phone, etc. So whatever that color code is, document it and follow that as you're plugging things in. Update your documentation. Yes, there are software programs out there too. Document your network and then occasionally pull that up and make changes or edits too. And I show you a couple different samples here of different documentation that might get done. All right, we will come back in the next section and start talking about some monitoring.